Welcome back to AU Family Channel, and thank you so much for being here. It truly means the world to have you as one of our loyal listeners. If our stories have ever touched your heart, we are so grateful that you keep coming back to spend this time with us. So find somewhere comfortable, take a slow, deep breath, and let us begin today's story, together. His name was Mr. P, though that was just what we called him, short for a long name none of us could pronounce, and he drove the number 7 school bus for as long as anyone in our neighborhood could remember. To most of the kids he was just the man who drove the bus, a fixture, invisible, the back of a head behind a big wheel. But Mr. P noticed things that no one else noticed, and one gray winter he noticed that I had stopped eating, and what he did about it quietly saved my life. This is the story of the bus driver who saw a child no one else was looking at, and the enormous difference one watchful, ordinary man can make. I was 11 the winter this happened, and my home had become a frightening place. My mother had gotten sick, not in her body but in her mind, a depression so deep that she could barely get out of bed, and my father had left years before, so there was no one else. I was, though no adult knew it, essentially taking care of both my mother and myself, an 11-year-old trying to run a household, keep my mother alive, and pretend at school that everything was fine. There was often no food in the house, because there was no one to buy it and no money to buy it with. I was going hungry, and I was terrified, and I was completely alone, and I told no one, because I was ashamed and afraid they would take me away. I got very good at hiding it. I wore a cheerful mask at school, did my work, laughed with the other kids, and no one suspected that the boy in the third row was going home each day to a dark house and a mother who could not get up and a kitchen with nothing in it. Adults are surprisingly easy to fool, I learned that winter, because they are busy and distracted and they see what they expect to see. My teachers saw a quiet, tidy boy who did his homework. They did not see the hunger, or the fear, or the 11-year-old drowning under a weight no child should ever carry. No one saw. No one, that is, except the man who drove the bus. Mr. P had a gift that I did not understand until much later. He watched. Every single morning and every single afternoon, dozens of children got on and off his bus, and he saw all of them, really saw them, in a way that the busy adults inside the school never did. He knew our names. He knew our moods. He noticed when a normally chatty kid went quiet, when a smile was fake, when something was wrong. From his seat at the front of that bus, with his big mirror angled over all of us, Mr. P watched over his riders like a shepherd, and almost none of us realized we were being watched over at all. What he noticed about me was the food. Our school gave out a free breakfast to any kid who wanted it, no questions asked, and Mr. P knew, somehow, that I had started eating it every single morning, and that I ate it like a boy who had not eaten since the day before, which I usually had not. He noticed that I had gotten thinner. He noticed that my coat, that gray winter, was too thin for the cold, and that I never seemed to have gloves. He noticed the small signs of a child who was not being taken care of at home, the signs that every adult inside the warm school building missed, because they were not watching the way a good bus driver watches. And Mr. P, having noticed, decided to do something. It started small, so small that I did not even understand what was happening at first. One cold morning, as I climbed onto the bus, Mr. P held out a paper bag and said, gruffly, that his wife had packed him too much lunch again, that she always did, and would I do him a favor and take some off his hands. Inside the bag was a sandwich, an apple, a granola bar. I was so hungry that I did not question it. I just took it, and I ate it, and it was the best thing I had tasted in weeks. And the next morning, there was another bag. And the morning after that. Every single school day, that whole long winter, Mr. P's wife accidentally packed too much lunch, and every single day, I was the lucky one who got to help him with the extra. I know now, of course, that there was no accident, that his wife did not overpack, that Mr. P was buying that food himself, out of a bus driver's modest paycheck, and packing it every morning specifically for a hungry boy he had noticed on his route. But he never let me know that. He protected my dignity as carefully as he fed my body, wrapping his charity in a little fiction so that I never had to feel like a charity case, so that I could take the food as a favor to him rather than a handout to me. 11 years old, and I did not have to feel ashamed, because a wise and gentle man had made sure the shame had nowhere to land. I have never forgotten the delicacy of that kindness. The food kept me alive that winter, but it was not the most important thing Mr. P gave me. The most important thing was that he saw me. For months I had been carrying an impossible weight in total isolation, invisible to every adult in my life, and the loneliness of that was almost worse than the hunger. And then there was this man, at the front of the bus, who somehow knew, who watched over me, who cared. He never made a big deal of it. But there was something in the way he greeted me each morning, a warmth, a steadiness, a look that said I see you, that told me I was not as alone as I had believed. To an invisible, drowning child, being seen by even one person is a lifeline. Mr. P was mine. As that winter went on, Mr. P's care expanded, always quietly, always wrapped in that protective gruffness. A pair of gloves appeared on my seat one morning, and when I tried to give them back he waved me off and said someone had left them and they would only get thrown out otherwise, so I might as well use them. A warmer coat materialized the same way, second-hand but clean and thick, that just happened to be my size, that someone just happened to have donated. Mr. P was clothing me and feeding me through a whole series of small fictions, each one designed to let me accept help without ever having to admit I needed it. He had turned kindness into an art form, and I was the fortunate canvas. I want to tell you about the morning I broke, because it was the turning point. It was a particularly terrible day. My mother had been very bad the night before, and I had not slept, and there had been no food, not even for breakfast because I had missed the bus that would have gotten me to the free breakfast in time, and I climbed onto Mr. P's bus that morning cold and exhausted and hungry and so frightened for my mother that I could barely see. And Mr. P took one look at me in his big mirror, and instead of pulling away from the stop, he put the bus in park. And he came back to my seat. And he crouched down beside me, and he said, very quietly, "Son, what is happening at home?" And I broke. All of it came pouring out, everything I had been holding alone for months, the whole terrible weight of it, my sick mother, the empty kitchen, the fear, the exhaustion, the shame, the loneliness. It all came out in a rush of tears right there on the bus, and Mr. P crouched beside me and listened to every word, and he did not flinch, and he did not judge, and he did not panic. He just listened, this gruff, watchful man, until I had said all of it, until the weight I had been carrying alone was finally, for the first time, shared with another human being. And then he said the words I had been starving to hear even more than I had been starving for food. He said, "You have been so brave. And you do not have to carry this alone anymore." Mr. P did not, that day, do the thing I had most feared, the thing that had kept me silent for months. He did not call people who would take me away from my mother. Instead, he did something much wiser and much kinder. He asked me what I needed. He treated me, an 11-year-old, as a person whose situation and wishes mattered. And then he quietly, carefully, over the following weeks, built a net of support around my mother and me that caught us without tearing our family apart. He connected my mother to people who could help her illness. He made sure food came to our house. He mobilized a whole quiet web of care, and he did it in a way that helped us instead of punishing us, that healed instead of separated. Because Mr. P understood something that the systems and the rules often miss. He understood that my mother was not a bad mother. She was a sick mother, a mother drowning in an illness she could not control, a mother who loved me desperately and was simply, temporarily, unable to care for me because of a darkness in her mind. And he understood that the answer was not to take a loving mother and her son apart, but to hold them both up until she could get well. So that is what he did. He got my mother help, real help, and he made sure I was fed and clothed and, most importantly, seen, until the day my mother was strong enough to climb out of her darkness and be my mother again. It took most of a year. But my mother got better. With the help Mr. P quietly arranged, she slowly climbed out of the depression that had swallowed her, and one day, months later, I came home from school and there was food in the kitchen and my mother was standing at the stove, cooking, humming, herself again, and I stood in the doorway and wept with a relief I cannot describe. I got my mother back. And I would not have, I am certain, if a bus driver had not looked in his mirror one winter and noticed a boy who had stopped eating. Mr. P did not just feed me. He saved my whole family. He kept us together through the worst of it, until we could stand on our own again. My mother, once she was well, learned the full truth of what Mr. P had done, how he had fed and clothed and watched over her son through the darkest months, how he had gotten her the help she needed, how he had done all of it quietly, expecting nothing, protecting our dignity every step of the way. And she went to that bus driver, this proud woman who had been so sick, and she tried to thank him, and she could barely speak for crying. And Mr. P, gruff as ever, uncomfortable with gratitude as ever, just waved her off and said that any decent person would have done the same. But that is not true. Any decent person would not have done the same. Most decent people never even noticed. Mr. P noticed. That was the whole difference. The lowest point in this story, strangely, came after we were saved, when I fully understood how close we had come to falling through the cracks. Because I realized that if Mr. P had been just slightly less watchful, if he had been the kind of bus driver who just drove the bus and did not really see the children on it, my mother and I would have been lost. I would have kept going hungry, kept drowning in silence, until something broke, until my mother's illness reached a crisis, until we were discovered in some catastrophic way that tore us apart. We had been one uncaring bus driver away from disaster the whole time. And it terrified me, then, to think of all the children on all the buses driven by people who do not look in the mirror. All the invisible ones, drowning, with no Mr. P. That realization planted something in me that has shaped my whole life. I decided, at 11 years old, that I would grow up to be a watcher. That I would be the kind of person who notices, who sees the invisible ones, who looks past the cheerful masks that struggling people wear. Mr. P had taught me that the most important thing one person can do for another is simply to pay attention, to really see them, and that this small act, available to anyone, costs nothing and can save a life. I could not repay Mr. P directly, not for what he had given me. But I could pass it on. I could spend my life watching over others the way he had watched over me. And I have tried, every day since, to do exactly that. Mr. P drove that bus for several more years, and I stayed on his route until I aged out of it, and every single day of those years, he watched over his riders like the shepherd he was. I began to see it now that I knew to look. The way he noticed the kid whose parents were divorcing before that kid had told anyone. The way he clocked the child who was being bullied and quietly rearranged the seating to protect them. The way he greeted every single one of us by name, with a warmth that told us, whether we knew it or not, that at least one adult in the world saw us and was glad we existed. He was doing for dozens of children what he had done for me, and almost none of them, like almost none of us, ever knew. There is a moment I hold on to from my last day on Mr. P's bus. I was moving up to a school with a different route, and it was the end of an era, and as I got off the bus for the final time, I turned back, and I finally said to him the thing I had wanted to say for years. I said, "Thank you for seeing me. Not thank you for the food, or the coat, or the help. Thank you for seeing me." And Mr. P, gruff old Mr. P, got tears in his eyes, the only time I ever saw it, and he said, "You were always worth seeing, son. Every one of you is." I just never understood why the grown-ups inside that building could not manage to look. And then he closed the doors and drove away, and I stood at the curb and cried. I learned so much from that quiet, watchful man about what it means to care for people. I learned that the most powerful thing you can offer another human being is your attention, your willingness to truly see them, especially the ones who have made themselves invisible out of shame or fear. I learned that the systems and institutions we build to help people so often miss the very people who need help most, and that it falls to individuals, to watchful ordinary people in ordinary jobs, to catch the ones who are falling through the cracks. And I learned that you do not need power or wealth or authority to save a life. You just need to look in the mirror, and notice, and care enough to act. A bus driver taught me that. It changed everything. Mr. P passed away some years ago, an old man by then, long retired. And at his funeral, something extraordinary happened, something that revealed the true scale of a life that the world had counted as small. The church filled, and then overflowed, with grown men and women who had once been children on his bus. Person after person stood up to tell the same story, in different shapes. He noticed me when no one else did. He saw that something was wrong at home. He fed me. He protected me. He saved me. It turned out that Mr. P had been quietly watching over and rescuing struggling children for his entire career, decades of it, and none of us had known we were part of a whole hidden multitude of the saved. A bus driver. Mourned like a king. I stood up at that funeral and I told the story of the winter I stopped eating, and the paper bags his wife supposedly overpacked, and the day he parked the bus and crouched beside me and asked what was happening at home. And I looked out at that overflowing church, all those grown-up rescued children, and I understood what one watchful person can do with an ordinary life and an extraordinary willingness to see. Mr. P never made much money. He never had any power. He drove a bus. And he saved more children than most doctors, changed more lives than most teachers, all from the front seat of the number 7, all by simply refusing to let a single child on his route be invisible. It is the most heroic life I have ever known. His wife was at the funeral, elderly now, and afterward I finally got to ask her about the lunches, whether she had known. And she smiled and told me that of course she had known, that every morning for years her husband had made extra lunches at their kitchen table, one for himself and one, sometimes several, for the hungry children he had noticed on his route. She said they were never rich, that the extra food was a real expense for them, and that he never once complained about it, never once considered stopping, because, he always said, a child who is hungry cannot learn, cannot hope, cannot be a child. So he fed them. Out of his own small kitchen, for his whole career, one paper bag at a time. She said it was the thing he was proudest of in his whole life. I think often about how invisible Mr. P's heroism was, how completely it happened beneath the notice of the world. There were no awards, no headlines, no recognition. He was, to almost everyone, just the man who drove the bus. And meanwhile he was conducting a decades-long, one-man rescue operation, saving the children that the schools and the systems missed, and doing it so quietly that even the children he saved mostly did not know. It has taught me to look completely differently at the so-called ordinary people all around us, the drivers and the janitors and the cafeteria workers and the crossing guards. Any one of them might be a Mr. P. Any one of them might be quietly holding up more lives than we could ever guess. Look again. Learn their names. Say thank you. I have tried to build my whole life around the lesson Mr. P taught me, the lesson of watchfulness. In every setting I find myself, I try to be the one who notices, who looks past the masks, who sees the person who is struggling in silence. I have caught people who were falling, over the years, because Mr. P taught me how to look, and every time I do, I feel him with me, that gruff, watchful presence, reminding me that this is the most important thing a person can do. He gave me my life, back in that hungry winter. And he gave me my purpose, too, the calling to spend my days watching over others the way he watched over me. I am still, all these years later, riding on the number 7, carrying forward what its driver taught me. People sometimes ask me what they can do, when they hear this story, how they can help the struggling children and adults all around them, and they expect me to say something big, something that requires money or expertise or authority. And I always tell them the same thing Mr. P showed me. You do not need any of that. You just need to look. Pay attention to the people around you. Notice when someone goes quiet, when a smile is fake, when a child seems hungry or a coworker seems to be drowning. And then care enough to gently ask, "Are you okay? What is happening? How can I help?" That is it. That is the whole of it. The watchfulness of one ordinary person, offered freely, is the thing that catches the ones who are falling. Mr. P proved it, one bus route at a time. My mother lived many more years after that terrible winter, well and whole, and she never stopped being grateful to the bus driver who had saved her family without tearing it apart. She used to say that Mr. P understood something that all the experts and systems missed, that a struggling family usually does not need to be broken up, it needs to be held up, that the goal should be to keep love together through the hard times, not to separate it. She was right. Mr. P could have reported us in a way that would have torn my mother and me apart, and it would have looked, on paper, like the correct thing to do. Instead he held us together, and we healed, and I got my whole childhood and my whole mother back. He knew the difference between breaking and holding. It is the difference that saved us. If there is one thing Mr. P taught me, it is that being truly seen is one of the deepest human needs there is, and that any one of us has the power to meet it for another person, for free, any day we choose. For months I was invisible, drowning in a silence that no adult pierced, and the loneliness of that was crushing. And then one watchful man saw me, and everything began to change, not just because of the food and the help, but because being seen told me I mattered, that I was worth noticing, that I was not as alone as I had believed. If there is someone in your life who has gone quiet, who is wearing a mask, who might be drowning in silence, see them. Let them know you see them. It might be the lifeline they are praying for. I learned that the cracks in the world, the places where struggling people fall through, are not usually closed by systems or institutions or programs. They are closed by individuals. By a bus driver who looks in his mirror. By a lunch lady who notices an empty tray. By ordinary, watchful people who refuse to let the person in front of them be invisible. The great machinery of society missed me completely that winter. Every institution designed to catch a child like me failed to see me. And I was saved instead by one man in an ordinary job who simply paid attention. That is where the real safety net is. Not in the systems. In the watchful hearts of ordinary people. We are each other's safety net, or there is none at all. There is an image I carry from that winter, and I return to it whenever I am tempted to hurry past someone, to stay in my own busy world, to not look too closely at the people around me. It is the image of Mr. P's eyes in that big rearview mirror, angled over all of us, watching, seeing, missing nothing. That mirror is my model for how to move through the world. Keep the mirror angled over the people around you. Watch. Notice. See the ones who have made themselves invisible. Because somewhere near you, right now, there is very likely a child who has stopped eating, an adult who is drowning in silence, a person wearing a cheerful mask over a breaking heart. And you might be the only one positioned to see them. Do not look away. Keep the mirror angled. Watch. The memory that means the most to me is not from that winter at all. It is from years later, when I had grown up, and I went to find Mr. P, still alive then, retired, to tell him what my life had become. I told him I had made it, that my mother had been well for years, that I had built a good life and spent it trying to watch over others the way he had watched over me. And this gruff old man, who had never been able to take a compliment, listened to all of it, and then he reached out and took my hand, and he said, "I always knew you would be all right. I saw it in you, even that winter." And I understood that he had not just seen my hunger back then. He had seen my future. He had seen the man I could become, and he had made sure I lived long enough to become him. I asked him, that day, how he had known to look, why he watched his riders so closely when he could have just driven the bus. And he told me his own story, which I had never known. He told me that when he was a boy, he too had been invisible, hungry, struggling, drowning in a silence no adult pierced, and that no one had ever noticed, no one had ever come, that he had survived it barely and alone. And he had promised himself, as a suffering child, that if he ever got the chance, he would be the person he had needed and never had. Driving that bus was that promise, kept, every single day, for decades. He was watching over children because once, long ago, no one had watched over him. His whole quiet heroism was a wound transformed into a gift. These days, whenever I catch myself too busy to notice the people around me, too wrapped up in my own life to really look, I think of Mr. P in that rearview mirror, and I lift my eyes, and I look. And I cannot tell you how many times, over the years, looking has revealed someone quietly struggling, someone I was able to help simply because I noticed them when others did not. Every one of those moments is Mr. P, living on through me, keeping his own promise through my eyes. The watchful bus driver who saved a hungry boy has become, in a way, a whole lifetime of watchfulness, rippling outward to people he never met. That is what one caring person can set in motion. It never stops. It just keeps looking out for the next invisible child. If there is one thing I want you to take from Mr. P's story, it is that you do not need to be powerful or wealthy or important to save a life. You just need to be watchful, and kind, and brave enough to ask a struggling person if they are okay. The most heroic person I have ever known drove a school bus, and he saved dozens of children with nothing but his attention and a few extra sandwiches. That power is available to you, right now, today, wherever you are. Look at the people around you. Really look. Find the ones who are drowning in silence. And then do the simplest, most powerful thing there is. Let them know they are seen. It costs nothing, and it can save everything. I learned that the goal, when someone is struggling, is not to break what is broken but to hold it until it can heal. Mr. P could have torn my family apart in the name of helping me, and instead he held us together until my mother was well, and that wisdom gave me back my whole childhood. When you find someone in crisis, remember that. Ask what they need. Help in a way that heals rather than punishes, that holds rather than breaks. Treat them as a whole person whose situation and dignity matter. That is the difference between the kind of help that saves people and the kind that harms them while claiming to help. Mr. P knew the difference. It is the most important thing he taught me, and I have tried to carry it into every act of care I have ever offered. Thank you so much for staying with me all the way to the end of this story. It truly means the world that you are here. If Mr. P and his watchful heart moved you, please give this video a like and subscribe to AU Family Channel, where a brand new story is waiting for you every single week. And remember what a bus driver taught a hungry, invisible boy. The most powerful thing you can give another person is to truly see them, and any one of us can save a life simply by paying attention. So this week, lift your eyes, keep the mirror angled, and look for the ones who are drowning in silence. You might be the only one who sees them. I will see you in the next one.